Brought to you by JMR Rentals, professional digital cinema and broadcast equipment rentals in Brooklyn, New York. JMRNY.com. And now get 15% off your first rental when you use the promo code WEEKEND. Call 347-721-3400 or email info@jmrny.com for details. Hello and welcome to No Rest for the Weekend, where we go behind the scenes and talk to the creators of independent entertainment. I'm Jason Godbey, and joining me via Zoom today, he is the producer, director of the new psychological horror film 645, Mr. Craig Singer. Welcome, Craig.
Thank you, Jason. Thanks so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be with you here and down the sunny Jersey Shore, and I'm excited to talk to you.
Yeah, your environment looks better than mine. Mine is fake, yours is real. Which is nice. I want to talk to you about the film. I had a chance to attend the premiere, which seemed very successful, the Regal Cinema here in New York City. Before I get into that, I want to talk to you about you. So give us a little bit about your background. How did you get into filmmaking? Like, what is your origin story?
Sure. I grew up in Paterson, New Jersey area, up in North Jersey, and my dad was a private eye, my mom was a travel agent, so those were my ties to the entertainment industry. So it was really not anything I ever thought I'd be able to do. It was always something other people did. But my dad used to always take me to every kind of imaginable film, from The Godfather to The Exorcist. So I had a really interesting, unfiltered look at really great cinema that kind of informed my passion for cinema. But again, I thought it was never something I'd be able to throw my hat into. And then in school, I did a PSA on gun control, which took top honors in the country. And that was the first time I thought, maybe, and we had no budget. It was like a no budget PSA. And it was kind of the first time I thought, well, maybe I could take a stab at this. And then I used to write letters to my favorite director, a gentleman named Elia Kazan, who discovered Brando and James Dean. And I never got to meet him, but he would write me back. And his family actually invited me to his funeral when he passed away. And it was an incredible, like, who's who of the actor's studio eulogizing Mr. Kazan. But he encouraged me. He said, don't worry about film school. Just, pick up a camera and shoot. And that's what I did. And I kind of cut my teeth with music videos and corporate image films. And lo and behold, I wrote my first film, Animal Room, and kind of begged, borrowed, and stole and maxed out credit cards and pulled in a ton of favors and made that film. And from there, I was fortunate enough to get distribution, and I got signed by William Morris, and then started my independent film career. And the rest, as they say, is history. It's a very kind of long and winding road, but certainly not easy. It's a very, very challenging industry at any level. But I stuck with it, and here we are.
You are the first filmmaker to name drop Elia Kazan on the show, which is pretty awesome. For you kids at home who don't know Elia Kazan, see On the Waterfront, see Streetcar Named Desire. Those are his films, both with Marlon Brando from the 50s. Fantastic movies. Well, let's talk about your movie. So 645. I was curious about the name. Like, why is it called 645? Giving you a little bit about it, can you throw me like a Hollywood log line about the film?
Well, it's, I always see 645 as almost like a romance, a love story where things go tragically wrong. And it's a Groundhog Day horror film. And at the time when I came up with the original, not so original concept, because there was Groundhog Day, but it hadn't become a cottage industry. There was really no time loop films the way there are today. And I thought it would be a great opportunity to take that story idea and to take it into something deeper and darker waters. And a young couple in love go on a romantic getaway, and something tragically happens, and the young man is forced to wake up every morning at 6:45 and kind of relive the day and try to prevent the tragedy from reoccurring. And I felt 6:45 was a good time, because if you were on a romantic getaway, if somebody woke you at 11 o'clock, it wouldn't be the end of the world. And 3 a.m. seemed a bit extreme. So I kind of came up with a happy medium of 6:45, a time that nobody wants to be woken up on their vacation.
That's part of the horror concept, is this guy's got to get up so early every day when he's supposed to be on his vacation.
In of itself is a horror film.
You mentioned sort of this Groundhog Day type trope, and we've seen it in a couple of different movies now. And some used better than other. I think like Happy Death Day used the same concept, and then there was another film that was on Hulu recently that it was like a romantic comedy, but it used the same concept. How were you kind of able to navigate the waters of this trope without it being cliche?
I've never seen Happy Death Day. I think I was secretly, subconsciously miffed because I believe I sent the script of 645 to Blumhouse well before Happy Death Day. So I think I had a little prejudice against that film, but I hear it's a good film. I hear tonally it's different than 645. The real challenge for me with 645 was to have the day repeat without it feeling monotonous. And I think that was something we needed to tackle head first with the acting, the scenes, the cinematography, the music, the editing, and I believe we accomplished that. There's a nice balance in our days that do in fact repeat, but not to the point where they're you know eye rolling and overbearing and just insufferable. I think that we have a really interesting arc and a nice kind of flavor to the film.
All of these things could be good things or they could be bad things depending on who's handling them.
Right.
For you, I know you shot this in New Jersey, you shot this down in Asbury Park, I believe. Can you talk about like maybe some of the challenges and working on location, and were you guys working during COVID or was this pre-COVID?
No, it was pre-COVID. We had a lot of people got sick, but we didn't know what it was. COVID wasn't a thing at the time. And so the challenges were really advantages shooting locally because it's kind of my backyard and my comfort zone. It's nice to be able to sleep in one's own bed. I did my last film for Lionsgate was called Perkins 14, and I shot that in Romania. That was challenging because when things come up, as inevitably they do with low budget filmmaking, it's hard to be nimble and thick on your feet when you're not really familiar with the geography, the terrain, the vendors. And here in Jersey, if something would happen, whether it's weather or something similar or technical mishap, you would be able to kind of adjust and pick up the phone and pull in some favors. So I think, shooting in Asbury and Tom's River and Seaside and Island Heights and Ocean Grove was really a blessing and something I look forward to doing again. I've shot a few of my films in Jersey. I've shot all over the world, but it's nice to be kind of, I'm a Jersey boy, and it's nice to be kind of in home territory, if you will. Bog Grove was more inspired by places like Block Island because we start with the ferry, right? And I knew I wanted them to be disconnected from the mainland. So if you think like Shutter Island, if there's a sense of dread and lack of safety because they're off the mainland. So we kind of created Bog Grove as this fictional place. And it feels like an island. And I think it's really, people often say that the, location's like a character in the film. But in the case of 645, I think it's really applicable and appropriate because you've got so many kind of iconic images that repeat, and it kind of creates a nice, cozy, claustrophobic vibe that's not typical and certainly architecturally intriguing.
What was the kind of impetus between like making a horror film as opposed to just making like a straight romance or a romantic comedy? Or like, I know that you've worked in the horror genre before, and a lot of indie directors do. It seems to be kind of like the money medium for indie films, but like, was it a marketing thing, or do you just like really love that genre?
No, I think comes from a real deep love and respect for the genre. I have an animation with Arlene Klasky, who created the Rugrats, called Ali Mongo, about a skateboarding zombie. I've got dramas and comedies. I've got an esports series called We Got Game. I think with 645 and with my next film, Tat, it's really about a love and respect for the genre. When I was a kid, Night of the Living Dead really messed me up in a very psychological, deep way. I had reoccurring nightmares for 20 years about one night a year, like The Purge, but it was Night of the Living Dead, where the dead would rise. And so that kind of power is pretty significant. Also, being low budget, the genre, the thriller horror genre, it's the only genre that's not star dependent, it's scare dependent. And it's also the only genre that crosses all borders. So if you make a comedy, it might be funny in Toronto, but it's not going to be funny in Curacao. If something's scary in Tokyo, it's scary in Ontario. So I have a lot of respect for that. And if you could, it's not easy because audiences can be very sophisticated. And the big trick with genre films is everything has been done to death. So you're trying to come up with kind of a variation on a theme or a twist that seems fresh, unique, and original is really half the battle.
because it's always the thing where people make horror films, and you can make them on a budget, and sometimes they do really well. Sometimes you get a hit, like when they made the paranormal activity movies and things like that, and you make a lot of money on a film that didn't cost anything to make. But like indie horror in particular, I think people make them, but I don't think most of them are not good. Like most of them are kind of throwaway. How do you make a good one? Like, if you were to kind of like give your advice to somebody who wants to make an indie horror film, what pitfalls should they avoid, and like what are the do's and don'ts, so to speak?
It's funny. You remind me of the old joke. How do you get to Carnegie Hall? And the practice, practice, practice. So with film, I think it's study, study, study film. Have a respect and dedicate yourself to craft, and God willing, you've got a little bit of talent and luck on your side, because it is hard. I think, like you said, to your point earlier, everybody's walking around with a film studio in their pocket via their smartphones, and they read about box offices like Paranormal Activity or Blair Witch. And so everybody and their grandma is making horror movies, but it's very difficult to kind of rise above the white noise and all the muck that's out there, and to get noticed and to get seen. So the fact that we're doing this exclusive relationship and engagement with Regal Cinemas is just, it's a godsend. It's really, really exceptional and unheard of for film this size to be up there with studio tentpole releases, which is becoming more and more the norm for the theatrical experience. And now with streaming, it's harder and harder for small films to be exhibited on the big screen, which is, let's face it, it's every filmmaker's dream. It's the Super Bowl of having your film in a theater with an audience and a shared experience, and that kind of setting is just becoming more and more uncommon. So we feel privileged that we were picked out, and the whole thing with Regal came to fruition, and they were just they couldn't be better partners, and they're really going above and beyond for our little film.
The premiere that I went to here in New York, was that the first? Was that just the New York premiere, or was that the world premiere?
Well, we won the Paris Independent Film Festival Best Feature, and that was kind of a nice shot in the arm. And then a friend of mine, Mike Rudnitsky, who's involved in theatrical distribution for about 40 years with companies like MGM, he was hammering me. We had coffee one day, and he was just like, "I want to watch the film. I want to watch the film." And he was relentless. And I said, "Mike, why don't you just wait till we do a friend casting crew screening?" And he's like, "No, no, no, no. Send me the link." So I sent him the. I buckled, and Mike watched the film, and he called me up the next day, and he said, "This is a quality film." And I said, "Do you think you could help me with maybe a New York, LA premiere?" And he said, "I think we could do a little bit better than that." And he delivered in spades. And Mike said two things that made me feel really good. He said, Regal doesn't do favors. He goes, if they don't really believe in the film, they're not going to release it. So they're not doing it for me. And then he said, subsequent to 645, he had sent them another film. And then we came back to him and they said, "Mike, it ain't no 645. So that made me feel really, really good. And since then, again, I can't say enough about Regal. Their team have been, anything that I ask for, they come up with really interesting, imaginative ways to kind of get the word out there for our little film, including pre-show trailers before films like M. Night's Old, which is on 7,000 screens, lobby takeovers, just email blasts. They're really just, it's unbelievable. It's almost like unimaginable, the types of things that they're doing for us, and I'm eternally indebted to them for it.
I think it would be interesting, like, so if you now could go back in a time machine and talk to your young self when you're first trying to get your first distribution for your first movie, what would you tell that guy? What's the insider information that you'd whisper in his ear?
Well, I had a real late start. I didn't even start my film career till I was like 30, which is pretty late. I would have told my younger self to start when I was 18, when I was just working crazy jobs. But I think even that life experience probably helped inform me as a filmmaker, because having done those kind of thankless, meaningless 9 to 5s or 9 to 3 in the mornings was good in terms of the depth and breadth of the types of stories that I like to tell. So, I mean, I don't know if I would have done too many things differently. I feel really fortunate. I've had films premiere at the Cannes Film Festival, Tribeca. I've had films in theater, and again, for what we do, that's kind of the exception to the rule. There's a lot of people who are really talented, just kind of banging it out there, trying to get their work made. Getting, the financing is never easy. My first manager was a wonderful guy named Jay Julian, who managed like De Niro and Scorsese and Joe Pesci, and he was like a legend. And he produced my favorite play, A Hatful of Rain, with Ben Gazzara and Shelley Winters on Broadway. And he told me my favorite quote. He used to say, Craig, he said, the entertainment business is the hardest way to make an easy buck. Meaning, once you kind of get there, things can happen, but to get there ain't easy. And he was right. And yeah, it's certainly certainly a challenging way to kind of live an existence, but I love it. I'm passionate about what I do. Don't do it for money. I do it because I love storytelling, and I love kind of the emotional impact that filmmaking can have on people.
I cannot think of a better way to put that. The hardest way to make an easy buck. With this film, you mentioned the cast a little bit. Do me a favor, drop some names and brag about your cast so people know who to look for in this thing.
Bragging away. Well, I couldn't afford a casting director, so I really had to go into my imagination, my Rolodex of people who I'd wanted to work with and people who I had worked with. For instance, Tom Waits. He directed my first play off Broadway called Paradiddle that Robert Dean Klein and I wrote. And amazing director. He co-starred with Al Pacino in American Buffalo, David Mamet's play. And you can imagine Al Pacino can choose any actor on earth to co-star with, and he chose Tommy Waits, who's one of the original Warriors, and he was in The Thing with Kurt Russell, and Justice for All, and Clan of the Cave Bear. In the case of Armin Garrow, I was at a Lyle Kessler play at the Actors Studio, and I saw Armin in the lobby. I recognized him from Sopranos and Vinyl and American Hustle. I said, I'm a huge fan of your work. I'd love to work with you one day. And he said, absolutely. So, and Augie and Michael, I hadn't worked with, but I met years ago, and we decided we wanted to work together and became partners. And Augie and Michael are just tremendous talents. And I think they're going to turn a lot of heads in 645, and wonderful things ahead for both of them. And then Allie Marshall, Sasha, Gordon, Sabina, 45 King, Remy Ma, everybody just was tremendous. And my crew also, I had a phenomenal experience with my DP Patasi and my editor, Sam Edelman, Kostas Christidis, my brilliant composer, Ron Aniello, who composed some of the music, Hakeem Draper, David Lotwin, assistant music supervisors with Joe Rudge. Just incredibly fortunate to be able to not only work with these people, and in some cases, like with the case of Sam, he was the first time I'd ever worked with him. And I've worked with a lot of editors, and Sam was just, again, probably the best editor I've ever worked with. Lucas Batasi, my DP, is going to be shooting my next film, Tat, which is another dark thriller, even darker than 645. And Robert and I are working on a script called The Block and Paradiddle, which is a drama. The Block is a horror film. So, yeah, we try to keep busy, and you got to have many irons in the fire, as you know, in this business, because you don't know what's going to hit. And it's like a bit of a horse race at times, right? You've got all these little children, and sometimes when a head pops up, and you got to give it a little nourishment and take those meetings, and then you take some more meetings, and when you think you're done, you take a couple more meetings. So that's, the life of a filmmaker.
Sometimes I think the job is taking meetings and talking to people.
My brother used to say, when he knew I was going out to a meeting, he used to say to me, haven't you met everybody yet? Because and I also have to do a shout out to my executive producers, Roy DiMaggio, who's the first guy who kind of started the ball rolling, just tremendously supportive, a wonderful partner. Jennifer Guprit, Don Basil, Paul Sina, Ray Mancini. I mentioned Ray Mancini is also in the cast, by the way. Ray and I are doing a drama called Monkey's Nest in Youngstown. He and his son Leo were both in my film. And Ray's been a tremendous friend and producer, and the Champ is just an incredible guy, and so he was wonderful to work with, as well as his son Leo, and Maria, my EP, and Jordan, and just my whole PR team, Marlia and Mike and Wally. It's been an embarrassment of riches to have such nice people. And the journey takes place during COVID, so it was an opportunity to kind of dive into work during a really scary time when the world was upside down, and we get to do like the one thing the pandemic encouraged, which is working alone in a dark room virtually with a bunch of really creative people, and not focus so much on the sky falling, but focus on creating a film.
It's great that you mentioned Ray Mancini. I'm a big Fight fan. And when I saw, I was like, oh my God, is that Ray Mancini? Like, I got to meet him. He's such a sweet guy. But I just thought, like, oh, he's a perfect, you have a lot of characters in this film. Like these are character actors and guys with faces. You know what I mean? And sometimes I look at Hollywood films and I get kind of sick of seeing all the pretty people, and I want to see people who look like real people.
Back to Kazan, that's people sometimes say, well, what did you love so much about Kazan? And if you look at the featured extras in Kazan films, whether it's A Face in the Crowd or Splendor in the Grass, the attention to detail with those faces that you mentioned were, I think, a lesson that really stuck with me, which is why we've got this rich treasure trove of great actors, let alone character actors.
Every once in a while you see these genuine guys, like a guy like Ray Mancini. The way he talks, the way he moves, he doesn't need to act. He already is, he already is a character kind of thing.
He's a great actor, and his son Leo's an up and coming actor too. You're going to see a lot from him. Also, I just wanted a quick shout out my sound designer Marshall Grupp and his team at Sound Lounge. They've always had my back for decades. I've worked with these guys, and Marshall's just an amazing artist. And the attention to detail on sound design, if you remove the sound design from any genre film, it's quite a different experience, as I'm sure you'll agree. So having folks like that who are really veterans and know what they're doing, and working side by side to make sure that all the little tertiary details are enhanced as best we can was a really wonderful experience.
You mentioned that you have another project that you're working on. Can you talk about that a little bit and just kind of give us a teaser for it?
Yeah, I'm working with Gurpreet Chanhok and Yael Baddick and Hal Lieberman, and also Don Basil, one of the executive producers on a film called TAT, TAT, which it really is immersed in the world of memorial tattoos and ceremonial tattoos. It's something, when I read an article, I was just blown away by this, and I kind of started researching memorial tattoos. And I found The Illustrated Man with Rod Steiger, and Bruce Dern did a film called Tattoo in the 70s, but nobody's done anything close to what we're going to do. Again, half the battle is coming up with something fresh, unique, and original, and this certainly qualifies. And it could potentially be a bit of a franchise, and it's scary and dark and very, very psychological. And we're just in the casting process right now. I haven't cast the film, but there's some actors that I've been talking to, and I think people are going to be pretty scared.
Very cool, man. When that comes out, you got to come back and talk about it. For people who want to know more about the film, want to know about you, where can they find you online?
645movie.com. So you can see bios, press, the cast, all the information you could ever want.
Great. Thank you so much. I'm going to wrap up, and thank you all out there for taking this trip down the rabbit hole. For more of our content, including our movie reviews, visit our website, norestfortheweekendpodcast.com. Don't forget to like, rate, and subscribe on your favorite podcast app. Once again, I want to thank my guest, Craig Singer, and our sponsor, JMR Rentals. For Behind the Rabbit Productions, I'm Jason Godbey. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.